Canada has been intensifying its trade diversification efforts, a key focus of Trade Minister Mary A's recent visit to the European Union. During her trip, she reinforced Canada's commitment to reducing its reliance on the United States in response to escalating trade tensions and newly imposed U.S. tariffs. To broaden its global trade network, Canada is actively fostering partnerships, particularly through its Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement, CETA, with the EU. Since its enactment, CETA has boosted trade by over 65%. Minister A's discussions centered on critical minerals, energy, and technology exports, further solidifying Canada's role as a key supplier to Europe. Beyond Europe, Canada is also shifting its energy exports towards Asian markets, particularly Japan and China, to lessen its historical dependence on the United States as its primary oil buyer. Previously, 97% of Canadian crude oil was exported to the U.S., but recent agreements with Japan and China indicate a strategic effort to diversify energy markets. Simultaneously, Canada is strengthening trade relations with Indonesia, South Korea, and nations in the Indo-Pacific region through the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, CPTPP, ensuring access to rapidly expanding economies. This trade diversification strategy not only shields Canada from potential U.S. tariffs in the future, but also enhances its economic stability and global competitiveness. Minister A's visit to the EU reflects Canada's long-term dedication to fostering international trade alliances and sustaining economic growth beyond its traditional reliance on the U.S. Trade Minister Mary Ang recently traveled to Brussels to fortify Canada's economic connections with the European Union, aiming to expand trade relationships beyond the United States. This initiative is taking place against the backdrop of ongoing trade tensions with the U.S., including new tariff threats. Since the provisional implementation of CETA in September 2017, trade between Canada and the EU has witnessed substantial growth. In 2021, two-way merchandise trade hit a record high of $100 billion, reflecting a 33.7% increase from 2016 levels, far surpassing the 18.6% rise in overall Canadian merchandise trade over the same period. Canadian merchandise exports to the EU surged from $22.2 billion in 2016 to $32.5 billion in 2021, marking a 46.4% increase, while imports from the EU also rose significantly, climbing 28.4% to reach $67.5 billion in 2021. The number of Canadian businesses engaged in exporting to the EU has also grown. Between 2016 and 2019, the count of Canadian firms shipping goods to the EU increased from 7,753 to 8,291, with small and medium-sized enterprises, SMEs, playing a major role in this expansion. Despite these positive trends, further opportunities remain to maximize the benefits of CETA. In 2020, only 57% of eligible Canadian exports utilized CETA's preferential trade provisions, highlighting a need to raise awareness and provide additional support to businesses so they can fully capitalize on the agreement. Minister Ang has underscored the importance of optimizing CETA's benefits in discussions with EU trade officials. She stressed the necessity of assisting Canadian enterprises, particularly SMEs, in navigating export regulations and overcoming bureaucratic obstacles to facilitate smoother market access and promote mutual economic growth. Given that SMEs comprise 98% of Canadian businesses, Minister Ang has emphasized the crucial role of supporting these firms in accessing global markets, particularly in Europe. To aid their entry into European markets, several initiatives have been introduced. Launched in 2016, the Can Export SMEs program provides financial assistance of up to $75,000 to help small businesses explore international markets. In response to challenges posed by the COVID-19 pandemic, the program adapted its support to focus on essential areas, including aiding businesses in establishing and expanding their e-commerce presence by covering expenses related to online sales platforms and digital strategy consulting. It also allocated funding for participation in virtual trade shows and other business-to-business events, ensuring that SMEs maintained global connections despite travel restrictions. Additionally, the program helped businesses overcome COVID-19 related trade barriers by offering assistance with obtaining international market certifications and meeting evolving regulatory requirements. These targeted measures were designed to equip SMEs with the necessary resources to thrive in an increasingly dynamic global trade environment. Efforts to remove bureaucratic obstacles and support businesses in adapting to shifting market conditions remain a priority. In February 2024, During the 4th Joint Committee meeting of Canada and the EU under CETI, both parties finalized negotiations on establishing rules to facilitate SME access to investment dispute resolution mechanisms. This initiative enhances SMEs' ability to benefit from opportunities created by CETA, providing them with a streamlined process for resolving investment-related disputes. Progress has also been made in mutual recognition agreements for professional qualifications. Canada and the EU are working toward an agreement that will enable architects to have their professional qualifications recognized across both regions. This arrangement is expected to reduce bureaucratic complexities and create greater opportunities for professionals and small businesses by making it easier to access European markets. Another area of strengthening cooperation is in the critical minerals sector. Canada and the EU have been deepening their partnership to secure and diversify supply chains for minerals essential to green technologies, such as electric vehicles and wind turbines. This collaboration is aimed at reducing dependence on non-allied nations while supporting sustainable economic growth. In 2021, both parties established the Strategic Partnership on Raw Materials, enhancing links between Canadian and European industries to create a more secure and resilient supply chain. This partnership also promotes joint research and development initiatives to advance extraction, processing, and recycling technologies for critical minerals while upholding high environmental, social, and governance (ESG) standards. Canada has identified 31 critical minerals essential to the transition toward a green and digital economy, recognizing their significance in manufacturing clean energy technologies, electric vehicle batteries, semiconductors, and other advanced industries. To position itself as a global leader in this sector, Canada has launched a critical mineral strategy, backed by nearly $4 billion in funding from the 2022 budget. This strategy outlines a comprehensive plan to develop, process, and export these essential resources while maintaining strict environmental and social responsibility standards. A key focus of the strategy is sustainable mining practices, ensuring that extraction and processing methods minimize ecological harm. This involves enforcing stricter environmental regulations, investing in recycling technologies to reduce dependence on new material extraction, and adopting low-carbon mining techniques, such as electrification of equipment and carbon capture initiatives. By prioritizing environmental responsibility, Canada aims to establish itself as a top producer of ethically sourced critical minerals, meeting the increasing global demand while maintaining robust environmental oversight. Another vital aspect of the strategy is engaging with Indigenous communities, as many of Canada's critical mineral deposits are located on or near Indigenous lands. The government is working closely with Indigenous groups to ensure they benefit from mining projects through revenue-sharing agreements, job creation, and skills development programs. Furthermore, these initiatives are expected to uphold the principles of free, prior, and informed consent under the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, reinforcing a framework for ethical and equitable resource development. The strategy also highlights the economic potential of critical minerals, with projections indicating that the sector could generate thousands of jobs and attract significant private and foreign investment. Regions abundant in these minerals, such as Ontario, Quebec, British Columbia, and the Northwest Territories, are likely to experience an uptick in mining activity, leading to infrastructure expansion and enhanced supply chain networks. Additionally, Canada is strengthening international collaborations, particularly with the European Union and the United States, to develop secure and diversified critical mineral supply chains, reducing reliance on adversarial nations. By focusing on innovation, sustainability, and Indigenous partnerships, Canada is positioning itself as a reliable and ethical supplier of critical minerals in the global market. The critical minerals strategy is not only designed to bolster Canada's economic future, but also plays a pivotal role in advancing the global transition to clean energy and digital technologies. Domestically, recognizing the economic impact of internal trade barriers, Transport and Internal Trade Minister Anita Anand has been collaborating with provincial and territorial leaders to implement reforms that remove regulatory obstacles hindering the free movement of goods, services, and labor within Canada. The objective is to unlock new market opportunities, attract investment, and drive economic growth by fostering a more cohesive national marketplace. A significant majority of Canadian small businesses, approximately 88%, believe that eliminating internal trade barriers should be a top government priority. These barriers often discourage businesses from expanding into new domestic markets due to the challenges of navigating differing provincial regulations. In response, the federal government has outlined an ambitious approach through the Federal Action Plan to enhance internal trade. This initiative underscores the critical need for the seamless movement of goods, services, and labor as a fundamental aspect of economic recovery, while aiming to accelerate the removal of these obstacles. In late 2024, during a dinner at Mar-a-Lago, President-elect Donald Trump suggested to Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau that Canada should consider becoming the 51st U.S. state, claiming that Canadians would benefit from lower taxes and improved health care. The comment was initially received with nervous laughter. However, following the meeting, Trump continued to reference the idea publicly, including a post on Truth Social on December 10, 2024, where he referred to Trudeau as Governor Justin Trudeau of the great state of Canada and expressed a willingness to engage in discussions on tariffs and trade. By December 18, 2024, Trump further claimed, without providing any evidence, that many Canadians supported the idea of annexation. In early January 2025, Trump escalated his rhetoric by threatening to impose a 25% tariff on all Canadian imports unless Canada made improvements to border security. He questioned U.S. financial aid to Canada, stating, "We're subsidizing Canada for almost $300 billion. If we're going to subsidize them, let them become a state." Prime Minister Trudeau firmly rejected the idea of annexation on January 7, 2025, stating that there isn't a snowball's chance in hell that Canada would become part of the United States. Despite this, Trump persisted, posting on December 25, 2024, that if Canada joined the U.S., its taxes would be slashed by over 60%, businesses would immediately expand, and the country would gain enhanced military protection. At a press conference on January 7, 2025, Trump ruled out military intervention but advocated for economic measures to pressure Canada, arguing that annexation would bolster national security and reduce U.S. expenditures on border protection. He later posted an image of the U.S. flag superimposed over Canada, captioning it with a reference to Canada's national anthem. On February 1, 2025, Trump announced the implementation of 25% tariffs on all Canadian goods, effective February 4, 2025. The next day, he reaffirmed his annexation stance on Truth Social, declaring that Canada should become the cherished 51st state, and promising to eliminate tariffs and offer military security if it did so. In response, Canada retaliated by imposing its own 25% tariffs on $155 billion worth of U.S. imports. However, following discussions between Trudeau and Trump, both nations agreed to a 30-day suspension on enforcing the tariffs. The United States has long relied on Canada's abundant natural resources, but Trump's recent remarks have raised concerns about the extent to which this reliance could influence U.S. policy. His proposal for Canada to become the 51st state, initially dismissed as a joke, has sparked discussions about whether the U.S. might seek greater control over Canadian resources. Canada is a global powerhouse in crude oil production, ranking as the fourth largest producer in 2023 with a daily output of 4.6 million barrels. Nearly 97% of these exports go to the United States, demonstrating the deep economic interdependence between the two nations. Alberta's oil sands contribute the bulk of this output, accounting for 87% of Canada's total oil exports. Canadian crude is heavily integrated with U.S. refining regions, with 61.8% of exports going to the Midwest, 18.6% to the Gulf Coast, and 7.2% to the West Coast. In 2023, these crude oil exports generated approximately $24 billion, making oil one of Canada's most significant economic drivers. In addition to oil, Canada is a major supplier of natural gas, ranking as the fifth largest global producer. In 2023, daily production averaged 17.9 billion cubic feet, with the majority sourced from Alberta and British Columbia. The United States remains the primary destination for these exports, facilitated by an extensive pipeline network. These natural gas exports were valued at $13 billion in 2023, reinforcing Canada's role as a crucial energy supplier to the U.S. Beyond fossil fuels, Canada holds a significant position in global mining. In 2023, the country accounted for a notable share of global nickel consumption and ranked as the fourth largest aluminum producer, generating 3 million metric tons in 2022. The aluminum industry, valued at $16.5 billion in 2024, benefits from Canada's reliance on hydroelectric power, resulting in a lower carbon footprint compared to other global producers. Canada is also the fifth largest gold producer, extracting 25.8 tons in 2022, with Ontario and Quebec leading production. In that year, gold exports were valued at $14.7 billion, with the United Kingdom, Switzerland, and the U.S. as primary buyers. Another key resource is uranium, essential for nuclear power generation. In 2022, Canada produced 7,351 tons, representing 15% of global supply and making it the world's second-largest producer. Valued at $1.38 billion, these uranium exports primarily supplied the U.S., Germany, and the U.K. Canada's hydroelectric power capacity is also substantial, ranking third worldwide, with Quebec, British Columbia, and Newfoundland and Labrador as the leading producers. In 2022, Canada exported over 50 terawatt-hours of hydroelectricity to the U.S., generating $5.8 billion in revenue. The forestry sector remains another vital pillar of the Canadian economy. Covering 280 million hectares of boreal forests, forest products contributed $33.4 billion to Canada's GDP in 2022, with exports totaling $45.6 billion, primarily to the U.S. Softwood lumber is a particularly important export, alongside pulp, paper, and newsprint. Potash, a key fertilizer component, further strengthens Canada's resource dominance. The country is the world's largest producer, generating 13 million metric tons in 2023, valued at $16.8 billion. Meanwhile, Canada's diamond industry, concentrated in the Northwest Territories, produced 16.2 million carats in 2023, with exports amounting to $1.7 billion, primarily destined for Belgium and the U.S. Given this vast wealth of natural resources, Trump's push for greater U.S. control over Canada's assets is seen as a strategic maneuver. His administration has suggested that incorporating Canada into the U.S. would guarantee resource security while simultaneously benefiting the Canadian economy. However, Prime Minister Trudeau has categorically rejected any discussions of annexation, firmly reinforcing Canada's sovereignty. Despite the political friction, the U.S. remains Canada's largest trading partner, underscoring the intricate economic ties between the two nations. The imposition of tariffs by the United States on its closest allies has triggered significant shifts in global trade strategies. Once deeply integrated into a U.S.-centric trade framework, allied nations have actively sought new partnerships to mitigate their dependence on the American market. This transition marks a long-term restructuring of global trade, where allies are not simply absorbing economic losses, but are instead forging sustainable business relationships with alternative partners. While the U.S. initially implemented tariffs as a means of economic leverage, the unintended consequence has been a surge in trade diversification among its allies. Nations such as Canada, the European Union, Japan, and South Korea, historically reliant on the U.S. market, have responded by aggressively negotiating new free trade agreements. The European Union, for example, has deepened its ties with Canada through CETA, while Canada has extended its trade reach through agreements such as the CPTPP with Asia-Pacific nations. Similarly, Japan and South Korea have accelerated trade negotiations with the EU, ASEAN, and other economic blocs to lessen their exposure to U.S. tariffs. Over time, these diversification efforts will enable U.S. allies to secure alternative suppliers and markets, making them more resilient to economic coercion. Strengthening trade ties with emerging economies not only ensures access to vital goods and resources, but also provides competitive advantages by tapping into new markets. Rather than suffering economic losses, these nations are establishing broader, more diversified trade networks. Conversely, the United States faces significant risks from this shift. By prompting allies to seek alternative trade partners, the U.S. is diminishing its own economic influence and restricting its access to global markets. As long-term agreements solidify, American businesses may find it increasingly challenging to compete, potentially leading to job losses and slower economic growth. Additionally, U.S. consumers are likely to feel the impact as tariffs drive up the cost of imports, leading to higher prices for essential goods, from electronics to automobiles and food. Ultimately, this realignment in global trade could leave the United States economically isolated, with reduced market influence and inflationary pressures that burden its domestic economy. If this trajectory continues, the U.S. may find itself at a disadvantage in a global trade environment where its former allies have moved on to build new economic alliances without it. That wraps up this video. Thank you for watching. We truly appreciate you taking the time to join us today. If you found this content insightful or thought-provoking, we encourage you to show your support by hitting the like button and subscribing to stay connected with our community. Your engagement means a lot to us, and we look forward to having you with us for future discussions. And if you are interested in more content like this, check out the next video now appearing on your screen.